She was Louisa Dunne, known to her neighbors in Bristol as a gentle and kind-hearted widow. She tended her garden with quiet joy, greeted passers-by with a nod, and never posed a threat to anyone. In June of 1967, the ordinary rhythms of her days were shattered forever. One evening, Louisa left home to visit a friend. She didn't return. The next morning, someone walked into her house to call out her name, and instead found horror. Louisa's life had been violently ended. Her body lay lifeless in the living room. She had been raped and strangled. The front door was locked. A single palm print on the window became the only trace of truth in a home grown silent with tragedy. Investigators descended. They dusted for prints, interviewed neighbors, chased every lead. Thousands of fingerprints were compared over months. Families were questioned, but no one matched. The trail went cold. Louisa's case slipped into the shadows labeled Unsolved, Untouchable. Years passed. The memory faded for most. Locals sighed and moved on. Louisa's name lived on in whispers, a cautionary tale of vulnerability, warning, and betrayal. The neighborhood remained watchful long after, oil lamps flickering. Children heard stories of murder and had dreams they couldn't explain. Her family mourned quietly. Louisa's granddaughter, Mary, grew up in a home where joy was tempered by that shroud of grief. Questions hung in the air, unasked. Stories were partial, told in fragments. Your grandmother loved her garden. She loved to bake, but never explained why her seat at the table remained empty. Mary learned not to ask. Grief can drown curiosity, if not allowed to breathe. Meanwhile, the man who took her life, Ryland Headley, blended into the narrative of normalcy. He worked as a railway employee. He owned a home. He didn't stir suspicion. But behind the facade lay darkness. In the late 1970s, he broke again, this time attacking elderly women in attacks that spanned communities. He was eventually arrested, tried, and convicted for those crimes. Sentenced, forgotten. Louisa's case, however, lay cold, frozen in a file, untouched by progress. Decades later, cold case units grew more confident in forensic science. DNA surged beyond imagination. Technology redefined possibility. Cases once considered hopeless became impossible not to solve. Louisa's case came back into view. Detectives re-examined old evidence, the palm print, the clothing, the statements. DNA swabs were reanalyzed. Test tubes that had held promise reopened. And then, finally, the breakthrough came. Evidence matched to Ryland Headley. The family demanded answers. Police confirmed the unthinkable. A suspect in one of Britain's oldest unsolved murders had been found living peacefully, decades after the crime. At age 92, Headley was arrested. The quiet man with an unassuming face, arrested for a crime older than some of his children. The moment rippled across newswire services. This was no small event. This was history, dragging itself in time as justice. The courtroom felt charged with time itself. The prosecution walked the jury through the decades, the fingerprint, the DNA, the patterns. How Louisa left her home one evening and never came back. How the palm print on the window went unlinked. How investigators collected 19,000 prints tirelessly. Decades of silence broken by modern innovation. They told of Headley's later crimes, burglaries, rapes of older women in the 1970s. They drew connections, not emotional leaps, a pattern of violence against the vulnerable. They described how forensic science, along with the persistence of people who refused to forget, became the instruments that finally led to his door. In the gallery sat Mary, older now, with hair streaked silver but eyes still clear. She listened, heart pounding, as her grandmother's story came alive in court. Words from 1967 mingled with new testimony. She wept quietly when a witness described finding Louisa. Her clothes, the way her glasses sat on a table, items left untouched, dignity violated. Headley showed no emotion, a man unrepentant. His eyes surveyed the courtroom, but never locked with any face. He was the final chapter in a story that might have become legend, if not for science. If not for those who believed truth mattered more than time. The jury deliberated. Evidence carried weight. Science, combined with human resolve, could not be denied. A verdict of guilty signed, sealed, delivered. Justice had caught up. Sentencing followed. The judge looked at Headley and said, "For a crime committed long ago but gut-punched across generations, you are sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. You will remain behind bars until your last breath." May this court's judgment bring peace to a story that took too long to resolve. After the courtroom cleared, Mary walked out and paused. She did not speak to press. Her face was quiet. She stared past the cameras, toward the street where her grandmother once lived. She held in her hands a small framed photo, Louisa laughing in the garden. Inside was written one name: Remember. Outside the court, investigators announced they would review similar unsolved cases from Headley's timeline. Offenses from Ipswich, old missives of violence against those too vulnerable to fight back. The hope: either exonerate or indict to clear the decks of doubt. This case became a symbol, not only of victory for one woman, but a message to every cold file, every family waiting, every investigator who wondered if it was ever possible. Because time may judge us all, but justice, though slow, can still strike true. Mary began a quiet campaign, speaking to cold case advocacy groups, encouraging families not to give up. Hope, she said in a soft voice, is not always enough. Action is her words echoed across the United Kingdom. Prosecutors referenced the case in conferences. Forensic teams taught classes on palm print preservation. Cold case units replicated the file system that solved Louisa's murder. Locals built a small memorial garden where her home once stood, planting lupins and roses, flowers Louisa once grew. A plaque reads, "In memory of Louisa Dunne, justice delayed, never denied." Often, justice feels like it belongs to the living moment. Today's headlines, today's victims. But this case reminds us, justice travels through decades. It finds cracks in time. It may bend under the weight of delay, but it does not break. Louisa's life, stolen in silence, created a legacy in sound. Mary told one parting line at a memorial vigil, "My grandmother's life mattered." Her name matters still. Her voice shook, but unwavering. Perhaps this is the greatest power of story, to force a society to remember, to demand that time is not excuse, to insist that even if justice sleeps, it may yet awaken. Better late than never, yes, but we must never accept justice late again. Let Louisa's case guide us toward resolve, toward action, toward honoring those whose voices were heard too slowly, but echoed anyway. Because in the end, the final verdict is not just for the guilty. It is for the grieving, for the silent, for the lost souls who never stopped waiting, and for all of us to listen, to remember, to never let time become enough of a barrier